Thank you for joining us today as we discuss some important issues around civil liberties and the business of war and peace. We have wonderful speakers arranged for today, from Campaign to Stop Killer Robots and their activism against autonomous veterans for peace that will be speaking about the experience of living through a war as a veteran and its impact on them. Code Pink, the first organization that was against the Afghan war and demonstrates in the Senate and the halls of Congress aggressively for ending the wars abroad. Let's see, Stop Spying on Us from New York with Albert Fox, talking about privacy and security of your devices. So there are AJ Rice from Portland Privacy and Tracy Rosenberg from Oakland Privacy. So it should be a great event series for today, and I'm really excited that you're with us. One of the things that I wanted to start by saying is, why do we use these events and mix it with comedy? Well, comedy and satire is protected as free speech. These companies that we criticize have every right to be criticized. Please don't think of them as human entities. They're not. Just because Citizen United wants to treat companies as human doesn't mean that we should. We have every right to criticize their business practices, of questioning their leadership, questioning how they treat their employees. And we want you to be involved in that process. We're going to talk more and more about how we are going to be doing this over the next few months to beat on the corporate PR machine and investments that they receive. One of the things that I wanted to talk today about was the whole business of surveillance and war. You know, for the past 20 years, we were lied to either by intelligence agencies that weren't so intelligent, by politicians that outright lied to us, or by the defense contractors and the surveillance state. So all three of them are a contributor to what led to a 20-year war that could have ended a lot earlier. So for that reason, I'm going to talk about the business of war and who actually benefited from these defense contracts. I'm going to share with you my screen. Give me a moment. This is a website that I really care about. I would highly bookmark it. It's Big Tech Sells War, how big tech companies are profiting from wars. So the global war on terror and the rise of big tech. The big tech contracts in the US are extensive. They've been spending over $44 billion since 2004 with companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Twitter. It's not just that they're selling data and your personal information to the NSAs of the world and to the defense contractors, but actually working on drone projects and weapons of inhumanity to be developed by organizations such as these. This is the actual amount of expenditure year over year by department. And as you can see, those expenditures are only growing in size. As I mentioned, the Department of Defense received $44 billion in contracts, was given $44 billion in contracts to distribute to the defense industry. Department of Homeland Security had $348 million in contracts to Microsoft and Amazons of the world. The State Department, $258 million. General Services Administration, $244 million, and the Department of Justice, $138 million. So when you think of war profiteers, it's not just Boeing and Lockheed, it's actually the companies in Silicon Valley that have profited from it. So here's a view of federal contracts since 2004 with Amazon. As you can see, those contracts are only growing in size. a lot of it with the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, Department of Justice, and others. Google, again, is at the service of these defense entities and works hand in hand with these organizations, and same with Microsoft. One of the things that I like to talk about is the revolving door between the tech sector and the big tech companies and the Department of Defense and State Department and other members of our government. Jared Cohen, who worked at State Department before moving on to Google, he founded Jigsaw. One of Jigsaw's first project was to develop counterterrorism tools for social media platforms that until recently focused solely on Muslim actors. Steve Pandelis, who worked for the FBI for over 20 years, including at the National Counterterrorism Center and Operation Technology Division, is now Director of Security at Amazon Web Services. Joseph Rosick, who played the integral role in the creation of DHS, is now Executive Director of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism for Microsoft, where he's responsible for developing and implementing a strategic business plan in the area of Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and information sharing. Nicholas Rasmussen, who worked as the Director of National Counterterrorism Center and is now Executive Director of the Global Internet Forum to Counterterrorism, which was founded by Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and YouTube with the goal of disrupting terrorist abuses of members' digital platforms. It has been criticized for not focusing enough on white supremacist and far-right groups and mirroring the same problems of social media platforms, relying exclusively on US government terrorist lists that almost exclusively targets Muslims. Here's a few more images. Steve Pandelius worked in the FBI from 1994 as National Counterintelligence Center and Operation Technology Division. He's currently as Amazon Web Services. Christine Halverson worked previously as an FBI March Deputy Assistant to Counterterrorism Division, currently works for Amazon Web Services, my former employer, Senior Technical Manager, Development Manager for Mission Acceleration Team, a Strategic Account Executives for Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. Jana Key, past, she worked at the Department of Defense from 2005 to 2007, including Strategic Global Wars on Terrorism, a Strategic Planning National Terrorism Center, currently works at Amazon Web Services as Cloud Security Strategist from 2008 on. The list goes on and on and on of John Turner, past position with FBI, including Deputy Assistant Director of Intelligence, now is the responsible for YouTube 2018 to present, Director of Intelligence, Trust and Safety. So there is no shortage of ex-defense officials, ex-Secretary of State, Secretary Department of State officials that work now in the tech sector. It's a revolving door. The tech companies pay for lobbyists. The lobbyists influence these politicians or wannabe politicians. They go to the people they trust, who happen to be like folks like Joseph Rosick, who was a special assistant to the president and senior director for domestic counterterrorism. Currently, he holds a position at Microsoft, the Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. So it's a revolving door between our government and big tech. And that's how big tech lands all these contracts with the various departments, including the Department of Defense for $44 billion. This is really disheartening. At the end of the day, you know, we need to be able to hold our representatives accountable. These organizations that sell war, they are in it to lobby on behalf of war. They hire people that are responsible for wars in our administration and put them to work. And it's a true shame on our government to have these kinds of people revolve and go to private sector and get whatever their job they want working in big tech while they sell out the American people. You know, we have had 20 years of war. Somebody needs to be held accountable. It has to be either the defense contractors, the intelligence agencies, the politicians, or us as citizens that were duped into buying whatever hopeful promises they made. So we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to stand against these organizations when they go out and bid on defense contracts, when they want to engage on contracts of war. We need to name and shame them. As one thing that I always say, it's these individuals don't deserve any of our attention except for the fact that we need to name and shame them. And they make blood money. Frankly, every single one of the people that you see on this bigtechsellswar.com website makes blood money. They benefit from wars and destruction and sending our GIs to war while they sit comfortably collecting their stock options at some of the big tech companies. So we need to do what we can to name and shame these individuals. And that's why I love this site, bigtechsellswar.com. And I highly recommend you take a look at it. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Jeff Bezos and his flight to outer space. We spent a lot of time and resources as a country in educating future generations about space flight. NASA was able to accomplish Jeff Bezos' space flight 60 years ago. So he did not contribute much in terms of technology. The technology has always been there. But what he has done with Elon Musk and Virgin Atlantic founder or Virgin Galactic founder is to commercialize it, is to make money from it. And that's after the technology is being handed to him on a silver platter. Why do you think he wants to go to the moon and is willing to pay NASA the $10 billion, the $2 billion cost associated with going to the moon? It's not that he's a generous man or he cares for developing NASA. It's just for his own ego. We need to think about how we privatize space. Do we want to have all these satellites orbiting us with men in power watching over us, working for these surveillance companies and entities in the US? Do we trust them with having that much power over us? I think it should be a serious concern. Ethics in Tech believes that as an organization, we want to see the space race be fundamentally owned by countries that are in it to win it, and they're not necessarily the private sector. So that's one area that I wanted to mention today. Finally, I want to talk about some of the Amazon's leadership principles. This is my former employer. You know, they want to take credit for a lot of good work that they do. And let me go ahead and bring up the Amazon leadership principles. Give me 1 second. So Amazon loves to talk about being a customer obsessed company. The question that I always have for Amazon, and you should always ask when you place an order with them, is who's customer of Amazon? Is it the Department of Homeland Security? Is it the Department of Defense that they get, billions and billions of dollars in contract? Is it the CIA with its $900 million contract? Is it its various defense agencies and intelligence agencies that receive billions and billions of dollars in support, infrastructure support by Amazon? Or is it that middle-aged woman or man that is buying their produce from Amazon? You see, Amazon may on the surface of it look like they're delivering milk and honey, but in reality, they're in the business of war, and that's where they make their money. They talk about ownership. They think that people should be in charge and owners and act on behalf of the entire company. Well, Amazon employees never say that's not my job. And I guess if you're an Amazon employee and it's not your job and you still have to do the work, that just means Amazon is piling on more work on you than you can handle. They don't have much ethics when it comes to honoring employees' labor rights, but they do talk a good game about taking customer ownership. Well, customer ownership by itself, without empowering employees to do the work, is not worth it. That is true. Amazon hires some of the best employees out there. But, what is the point of hiring the best employees when your whole goal as a business is to sell data on your customers or to market to your customers products and services they don't need? Amazon develops the best, but it develops it for selling junk. Amazon is the leader when it comes to selling cheap Chinese goods that have no quality, that have no standards. And this goes to my next point: is Amazon insisting on the highest standards? Whose standards are Amazon insisting? Are those Amazon standards the cheap Chinese manufacturers that put out goods? Are Amazon standards something that's defined? Clearly, in my view, it's not. In regards to having backbone, disagree, and commit, I can tell you that I've had a backbone and it's been reinfused with metal after my suicide attempt 7 years ago, practically to this day. But Amazon doesn't have a backbone. It's basically Amazon's organization that does not respectfully challenge the decisions when they disagree. They will simply kick you out of the company. And it's a very hostile work environment that Jeff Bezos has created. Now, they added a couple of more leadership principles. I think Amazon must have been feeling guilty that there is no empathy. There's no empathy for its employees, and they want to be the best employer on earth. So they added a couple of more commandments when it comes to their everyday relationship and how they want to improve to respond to Earth's needs. But again, this is all marketing hype. Amazon working for them, you notice that they don't follow most of these principles, except for maybe the customer obsession because there are so many obsessed. One of the questions I always ask the executives in Silicon Valley, and maybe this is why I don't get a job, is I always ask during an interview, what is a kind of contract or business that you're willing to walk away from, Mr. Executive? you're in sales leadership or in marketing in a company. Tell me, where do you draw the line? Who are you willing to say no to? And majority of these companies don't have that defined. They will accept money from anybody and everybody. That's why it doesn't matter if it's the DHS or Homeland Security or the FBI that's paying them. They'll be happy to receive that cash and sell out customer data. It's unfortunate, but they don't have any standards as to who they deal with. I was wondering about this problem of, why is such a lack of ethics and principles in Silicon Valley? And give me 1 second. And honestly, I didn't know who to blame. Is it our universities that maybe they're not creating passionate enough students to care about issues than their own pocketbooks? Is it our government agencies that don't bother to regulate these tech giants? Or ultimately, is it the industry's fault for not doing enough to regulate itself? And finally, is it the nonprofits' fault? Are we the ones to blame for the actions of these nonprofits, for the action of our government and these corporations? The buck has to stop with somebody. And I want to talk to you about the concept of what I call greed learning. It's machine learning and capitalism combined. It's basically the kids coming out of universities these days. They might have the proper analytic skills. They might have the proper tools that they need. They might have taken every certification online that's been available to them. But none of that certification told them you should have empathy for your fellow man. They all focused on giving him tools and knowledge on how to make money, how to make a living, but it doesn't give them the knowledge to give back to society. So what I call greed learning is a combination of machine learning and algorithms that control our stock market, that control our Bitcoins purchases, that controls every aspect of our lives, from our privacy to security to online transactions. And of course, machine capitalism. And I mean the brute sheer force capitalism of not caring for your fellow man, of just wanting to monetize everything that you see. And so the concept of greed learning is I want to put out there to activists as something to consider. Are we stricken by this as a society or not? And hopefully we get a chance to talk about that as well.